The exam hall doors would close in 60 seconds. Amelia Hart's worn sneakers slapped against the cracked pavement as she sprinted down Fifth Avenue, her backpack bouncing against her spine with each desperate stride. 23 years of poverty, sacrifice, and sleepless nights had led to this single morning, the medical board examination that separated her current life of double shifts at the diner from the future she'd bled for. Her brother's face flashed through her mind, 7 years old with eyes too knowing for his age, asking when they'd have electricity again. Soon, she'd promised him. After today, everything changes. The building loomed ahead, its glass doors reflecting the early morning sun. 45 seconds. Her lungs burned, her vision blurred at the edges, but her legs pushed harder. She could see other candidates filing through the entrance, their pristine study materials tucked under their arms, their faces calm with the confidence that came from stability. They hadn't studied by candlelight. They hadn't chosen between textbooks and groceries. 30 seconds. The screech of tires shattered the morning air. Amelia's head whipped toward the intersection just as a black sedan careened through the red light, metal grinding against metal in a symphony of destruction. The vehicle flipped once, twice, before slamming into a streetlight with a sound that made her bones ache. Steam hissed from the crumpled hood. Glass littered the street like deadly diamonds catching the light. 20 seconds. Her feet stopped moving. Every instinct screamed at her to keep running, to let someone else handle it, to choose herself for once in her life. But then she saw her, a woman's pale hand pressed against the spider-webbed rear window, fingers spread wide, smearing blood across the glass in a desperate plea. 15 seconds. Amelia's backpack hit the ground. She was running again, but not toward her future. Her medical training kicked in before conscious thought could intervene, her mind cataloging injuries and probabilities as she yanked open the mangled door. The woman inside was young, maybe 30, with dark hair matted to her forehead and a swollen belly that made Amelia's heart stop. 8 months pregnant, maybe more. Blood soaked through an elegant cream dress that probably cost more than Amelia made in 6 months. Please. The woman's voice was barely a whisper, her hand clutching Amelia's wrist with surprising strength. Please, my baby. Behind her, Amelia heard the exam hall doors slam shut. The sound echoed through her chest like a death knell, but her hands were already moving, checking for a pulse, assessing the bleeding. A deep laceration across the woman's abdomen, possible internal injuries, signs of early labor. She needed a hospital immediately, but the ambulance sirens were still distant, and the woman's grip was weakening. I'm here. I've got you. Amelia stripped off her jacket, pressing it against the wound with practiced pressure. Stay with me. What's your name? Sophia. The woman's eyes fluttered, unfocused. Sophia Romano. The name meant nothing to Amelia. She was too busy keeping Sophia conscious, monitoring her breathing, talking to her about anything and everything to keep her tethered to the world. She delivered instructions to the gathering crowd with an authority she didn't feel: someone call an ambulance, someone stop traffic, someone find clean cloth. Her hands were steady even as her future crumbled around her, even as she watched other candidates emerge from the building, their exams complete, their lives moving forward while hers ground to a halt. The ambulance arrived after an eternity that lasted 7 minutes. Paramedics swarmed the scene, professional and efficient, but Amelia didn't let go until they physically pulled her back. She gave them a rapid-fire assessment, her medical terminology flowing despite never having earned the right to use it in any official capacity. They listened because she knew what she was talking about, because her hands were covered in Sophia Romano's blood, because she'd made choices they recognized. Sophia's hand shot out one last time before they loaded her into the ambulance, catching Amelia's wrist. Thank you, she breathed, her eyes suddenly sharp and focused. He'll come for you. He always pays his debts. Then she was gone, the ambulance screaming away, and Amelia was left standing in the street covered in blood and shattered dreams. Someone pressed her backpack into her hands. Someone else asked if she needed medical attention. She shook her head, numb, and started the long walk home. The apartment she shared with her brother was exactly as she'd left it, dishes in the sink, medical textbooks scattered across the table, a notice from the landlord threatening eviction. Tommy was at school, thank God, so he couldn't see her face when she finally allowed herself to break. She stood in the shower fully clothed, watching pink water circle the drain, and let herself imagine what her life might have been if she'd kept running. The sob that escaped her throat was raw and animal, torn from somewhere deep and desperate. A year. She'd have to wait an entire year to retake the exam, assuming she could even afford the fee again. A year of diner shifts and mounting debt, a year of watching Tommy grow up in poverty because his sister couldn't save herself. She'd made her choice on instinct, on the medical oath she'd memorized but never officially taken, and now they'd both pay for it. She was still sitting on the shower floor when her phone buzzed. An unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her thumb accept the call. Miss Hart? The voice was male, professional, and somehow chilling in its courtesy. A car will arrive at your address in 30 minutes. Please be ready. Who is this? Someone who appreciates what you did this morning. Please, Miss Hart. It would be unwise to refuse. The line went dead. 29 minutes later, she stood at her window and watched a black Mercedes pull up in front of her building. It was the kind of car that didn't belong in her neighborhood, sleek and expensive and dangerous. Two men in dark suits emerged, their movements coordinated in a way that suggested military training or worse. One opened the rear door and looked up at her window with unsettling precision, as though he'd known exactly where to find her. Amelia's hands shook as she grabbed her jacket. She didn't know why she was going, except that something in the man's voice had promised consequences for refusal. She left a note for Tommy with the neighbor, claimed she had a job interview, and descended to meet whatever fate she'd earned. The men said nothing as she slid into the leather interior. The door closed with a heavy thunk that sounded like a cell locking. They drove through the city in silence, leaving behind the crumbling buildings and trash-lined streets of her world and entering a realm of pristine brownstones and tree-lined avenues where even the air seemed cleaner. The car turned into a private driveway fronted by iron gates that opened without a touch, climbing toward a mansion that looked like it had been transplanted from a European countryside. The front door opened before they reached it. He stood in the doorway, and Amelia's breath caught despite herself. Tall, maybe 6'3", with dark hair swept back from a face that could have been carved from marble if marble could look that dangerous. He wore a black suit that fit like a second skin, and his eyes, gray like winter storms, tracked her approach with an intensity that made her want to run. But there was something else in those eyes too, something that looked almost like pain buried beneath layers of ice and violence. Miss Hart. His voice was deep, cultured, with the barest hint of an accent she couldn't place. Thank you for coming. Did I have a choice? A smile flickered across his face, brief as lightning. I like that. You're afraid but you don't show it. He stepped aside, gesturing into the house. Please. Sophia is asking for you. The name brought everything into focus. She's alive? The baby? Both, thanks to you. He led her through rooms that belonged in museums, past art that was probably priceless, into a private wing that had been converted into a medical suite that would put most hospitals to shame. Sophia lay in the hospital bed, pale but alert, her hand resting on her still swollen belly. Her face transformed when she saw Amelia. You came. Sophia's voice was stronger now, though still weak. Matteo, this is her. This is the woman who saved us. So this was Matteo Romano. The name that meant nothing to Amelia suddenly felt heavy with significance, like she should know it, like it should mean something. She approached Sophia's bedside, her training overriding her fear as she assessed the woman's condition with a practiced eye. You should be in a hospital, Amelia said bluntly. I have better care here. Sophia squeezed her hand. Because of you, my daughter will be born. Because of you, my brother isn't planning a funeral. How can we ever repay that? You can't. The words came out harsher than Amelia intended. And you don't need to. I did what anyone would have done. Anyone? Mateo's voice came from behind her, close enough that she could feel the heat of him. You gave up everything. I know about the exam, Miss Hart. I know what it cost you. She turned to face him, anger flaring hot in her chest. How do you know about that? I make it my business to know things. He moved to stand beside Sophia's bed, and the change in his demeanor was startling, the dangerous edge softening into something almost tender as he looked at his sister. Especially when someone risks everything to save the only family I have left. It was the right thing to do. The right thing. He repeated the words like they were foreign, like he was testing their weight. Tell me, Miss Hart, how much good has doing the right thing done for you? You work double shifts at a diner that pays you under minimum wage. You're 3 months behind on rent. Your brother needs new shoes and a winter coat you can't afford. Your landlord will evict you in 2 weeks if you can't pay what you owe. He moved closer, his presence overwhelming in its intensity. You sacrificed your one chance at escaping all of that to save a stranger, and now you have nothing. Does that feel right to you? Tears burned behind Amelia's eyes, but she refused to let them fall. How dare you investigate me? How dare I reward you? He pulled an envelope from his jacket, holding it out to her. Inside is a check that will cover your debts, your brother's needs, and every exam fee you'll face for the next decade. Also, a contract for employment as Sophia's private nurse during her pregnancy and the first year of her child's life. The salary is more than you'd make as a resident physician. The benefits include housing in one of my properties, security, and guaranteed acceptance into the medical program of your choice when your employment ends. Amelia stared at the envelope like it might explode. Why would you do this? Because you saved what I cannot bear to lose. Mateo's voice dropped to something raw, something real beneath the polished surface. Because you made a choice that most people only pretend they'd make. Because I always pay my debts, Miss Hart, and this is a debt I can never fully repay. I don't want your money. Liar. The word wasn't cruel, just honest. You don't want to want it. There's a difference. But think of your brother. Think of giving him a childhood that isn't defined by poverty and fear. Think of having the time to study, to sleep, to become the doctor you were meant to be. He placed the envelope on the bedside table. Or refuse, if it makes you feel noble, and go back to choosing between electricity and food. The words hit like physical blows because they were true. She thought of Tommy, of his too-thin frame and the way he pretended not to be hungry. She thought of her apartment, of cockroaches and mold and the constant anxiety that kept her awake at night. She thought of being 35 and still working at the diner because she'd run out of chances. What's the catch? Her voice was barely a whisper. The catch is that you'll live in my world. Mateo's eyes held hers with uncomfortable honesty. You'll see things that nice girls from poor neighborhoods aren't supposed to see. You'll be under my protection, which means you'll also be under my control. Men with guns will follow you. Your life will no longer be entirely your own. And if I say no? Then you walk out that door with my gratitude and nothing else. But Sophia loses the only nurse she trusts, and you lose the only opportunity that's ever chosen you back. He paused, something flickering across his face. I won't force you, Miss Hart. That's not who I am. But I'm asking you to be practical in a way that your instincts won't let you be. Amelia looked at Sophia, who watched her with quiet hope. She looked at the envelope, at the promise of everything she'd dreamed of. She looked at Matteo Romano, at the dangerous beautiful man who somehow saw her more clearly than anyone else ever had. She picked up the envelope. I'll do it for Sophia, she said, meeting his eyes. Not for you. Not for the money. Because she needs someone who actually cares whether she lives or dies. Matteo's smile was slow and devastating. Whatever helps you sleep at night, Miss Hart. The next 3 weeks restructured Amelia's entire existence. Mateo's men moved her and Tommy into a brownstone in a neighborhood where the streets were clean and the schools had functioning heating systems. Tommy's reaction to his own bedroom had made Amelia cry in the bathroom for 20 minutes. The furniture was tasteful, the appliances new, and the security system sophisticated enough to make her nervous. Men in suits watched their building at all hours, a constant reminder that this wasn't charity, it was ownership. She spent her days with Sophia, monitoring her health, managing her medications, and slowly becoming something like a friend. Sophia was surprisingly easy to like, funny, warm, and utterly devoted to the baby growing inside her. She talked about her late husband, a man who'd died in a car accident 2 years earlier, and about Mateo's fierce protectiveness that sometimes felt like suffocation. "He loves me," Sophia said one afternoon as Amelia checked her blood pressure. "But he doesn't know how to love without controlling. Our father raised him to lead, to dominate, to never show weakness. Showing emotion is weakness in his world." "What world is that exactly?" Amelia had been careful not to ask directly, but the question had been building for weeks. Sophia's smile was sad. "You really don't know, do you? Matteo Romano. The Romano family. We've controlled this city's underworld for 3 generations." She watched Amelia's face carefully. "Does that frighten you?" It should have. It absolutely should have terrified her. But Amelia thought of Matteo's tenderness with his sister, of the way he'd offered her a choice when he could have simply taken what he wanted. "I don't know what I feel," she admitted. "Except that you're my patient, and that matters more than anything else." "That's why he chose you." Sophia squeezed her hand. "Because you see people, not power. Because you choose what's right even when it costs you everything." Matteo himself was a constant presence without being present. She rarely saw him directly, but his influence saturated every moment. The groceries that appeared without ordering. The medical equipment that arrived before she knew she needed it. The envelope of cash that showed up weekly, far more than their agreed salary. Tommy's new school supplies, his winter coat, the tutor who appeared to help him catch up on the education he'd missed. When she finally confronted Matteo about it in his study, he barely looked up from his paperwork. "You're paying me too much," she said without preamble. "I'm paying you what you're worth. The contract specifies. The contract specifies a minimum. I'm not bound by minimums, Miss Hart." He set down his pen, finally giving her his full attention. "Is there a problem?" "Yes. I feel like you're trying to buy me." "I am buying you." His bluntness was jarring. "Your time, your skills, your presence in Sophia's life. That's what employment is. Or are you uncomfortable because you're starting to like it here? Because your brother is happy? Because you're not constantly afraid?" The accuracy of his observation made her angry. "I don't trust this. I don't trust you." "Good." Matteo stood, moving around his desk with predatory grace. "You shouldn't trust me. I'm not a good man, Amelia. I've done things that would make you sick. I'll do more before I die. But I keep my word, and I protect what's mine. Right now, that includes you." The use of her first name sent electricity down her spine. "I'm not yours." "Aren't you?" He stopped close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. "You live in my house. You eat my food. You're protected by my men. Your brother thrives because of my resources. Every part of your life is now connected to mine. That's ownership, Amelia, no matter what words we use to soften it." "Then I'll leave." The threat sounded hollow even to her own ears. "You won't." His hand came up to cup her jaw, thumb brushing her cheek with unexpected gentleness. "Because leaving means taking it all away from Tommy. Because Sophia needs you. Because some part of you wants to stay, and that terrifies you more than anything I could do." He leaned in, his breath warm against her ear. "I see you, Amelia Hart. Every scared, determined, magnificent part of you. And I'm not letting you go. He released her and returned to his desk as if nothing had happened, leaving her shaking in the doorway. She should have been furious. She should have felt violated or threatened. Instead, she felt something far more dangerous, seen. The attempts on their lives started 2 months into her employment. The first was subtle, a car that followed them through the city, too persistent to be coincidence. Matteo's security detail handled it with efficiency that suggested extensive practice. The second was more direct, a break-in at Sophia's doctor's office the night before a scheduled appointment, files stolen, appointments cancelled. They moved all of Sophia's care to the mansion's medical suite and doubled the guards. The third attempt nearly succeeded. Amelia was walking Tommy home from school, a routine she'd insisted on maintaining despite Matteo's protests. The afternoon was golden, autumn leaves crunching under their feet, Tommy chattering about a science project. She didn't see the man until he was too close, gun rising with professional precision. Training took over. She shoved Tommy behind her and raised her hands, heart hammering, mind racing through impossible scenarios. The man's finger tightened on the trigger. The shot rang out, but Amelia didn't fall. Matteo stood 10 feet away, his own weapon smoking, the would-be assassin crumpling to the ground. More men appeared from nowhere, his security team converging on the scene with military precision. One of them scooped up Tommy, who was screaming. Another guided Amelia toward a waiting car while Matteo stood over the fallen man with an expression of such cold fury that she barely recognized him. She didn't remember the drive back to the mansion. She was suddenly in her room, Matteo's hands gentle as he checked her for injuries, his voice a low murmur of Italian she didn't understand. Tommy was with Sophia, she was told. He was safe. He was fine. You could have died. Her voice sounded distant, shocked. You didn't even hesitate. Of course not. Matteo's hands stilled on her shoulders. Did you hesitate when Sophia was bleeding out? Did you hesitate when you pushed your brother out of the way? He forced her to look at him. We protect what matters, Amelia. That's the only rule that counts. Why does this keep happening? His jaw tightened. Because of me. Because Sophia's survival complicated certain plans. Because you saved her, you've become a liability to my enemies. He stood, pacing like a caged animal. I should have anticipated this. I should have kept you away from it all. But I was selfish. I wanted you close. The admission hung in the air between them. What are you saying? Amelia's voice was barely a whisper. Matteo turned to face her, and for the first time since they'd met, he looked uncertain. I'm saying that you've become more than Sophia's nurse. You've become someone I think about too much, someone whose safety matters more than strategic sense. I'm saying that I've fallen for the woman who chose a stranger over her future, who faces me without fear, who sees past the monster to whatever humanity I have left. He moved closer, cupping her face with hands that had killed but touched her like she was precious. I'm saying that I'm in love with you, Amelia, and it's the most dangerous thing I've ever felt. She should have pulled away. She should have remembered who he was, what he did, the blood on his hands. Instead, she kissed him. The kiss was desperate and inevitable, months of tension igniting into something that consumed them both. His hands tangled in her hair, her fingers gripping his shirt, and for a moment, nothing else existed, not the danger, not the moral complications, not the voice in her head screaming that this was wrong. There was only him, only this, only the terrifying truth that she'd fallen for the man who'd bought her life but somehow given her more freedom than she'd ever known. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Matteo pressed his forehead to hers. I can't protect you if you won't let me. I can't keep you safe if you insist on walking around like you're invincible. Then teach me. The words surprised her, but she meant them. Teach me how to survive in your world. Stop treating me like I'm breakable and start treating me like I'm yours. His eyes darkened with something fierce and possessive. Careful what you ask for, Amelia. I stopped being careful the day I chose your sister over my exam. She kissed him again, softer this time. Teach me. The next month transformed her. Mateo's men trained her in self-defense, in weapons handling, in the art of reading a room for danger. She hated the violence but loved the competence, the feeling of not being helpless. Sophia's pregnancy progressed smoothly, her daughter growing stronger every day. Tommy flourished in his new school, his laughter filling spaces that had been silent too long. And Amelia fell deeper in love with a man who was everything wrong and somehow felt completely right. They were in Mateo's study when Sophia came to find them, her face pale, her hand on her belly. "It's time," she said simply. The birth was long and difficult, but Amelia guided Sophia through it with steady hands and a calmer voice than she felt. Mateo refused to leave his sister's side, his usual composure cracking as he held Sophia's hand and whispered encouragements in Italian. When the baby finally arrived, a perfect, screaming, beautiful girl, Amelia placed her in Sophia's arms and felt tears streaming down her own face. "Thank you," Sophia breathed, looking up at Amelia with exhausted joy. "Thank you for everything. Thank you for stopping that day." Mateo's hand found Amelia's, squeezing tight. "Thank you for choosing us," he said quietly. 2 weeks later, Amelia found the envelope on her pillow. Inside was a registration confirmation for the medical board exam, scheduled for the following month at a special session that shouldn't have existed. There was also a note in Mateo's precise handwriting. "You gave up your future to save my sister. I'm giving it back. The exam is legitimate. The results will stand. And regardless of whether you pass or fail, you'll always have a place here. Not as an employee. As family. As mine. You chose us. Now I'm choosing you. Forever, if you'll let me. M." She found him on the mansion's terrace, watching the sun set over the city he ruled through fear and blood. He turned when he heard her approach, his expression guarded. "How did you do it?" she asked. "Do you really want to know?" She thought about that. Thought about the moral lines she'd already crossed, the compromises she'd made, the life she'd chosen. "No," she decided. "I just want to know why." "Because you gave up everything without asking for anything in return." Mateo pulled her close, his arms secure around her. "Because in a world of transactions, you were the only one who expected nothing. Because you saw me, really saw me, and didn't run." He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, finally her mouth. "Because I love you, Amelia Hart, and I would burn this entire city to the ground if it meant giving you back what you lost for us." "That's terrifyingly romantic," she murmured against his lips. "I'm a terrifying man." "I know." She pulled back to look at him, this dangerous beautiful man who'd restructured her world. "I love you too. I probably shouldn't, but I do." "Probably?" His smile was devastating. "Definitely shouldn't." She kissed him again. "But I'm going to anyway. Just like I'm going to take that exam, and I'm going to pass it, and I'm going to become the doctor I was meant to be. And then I'm going to come back here, to you and Sophia and Tommy and this complicated, impossible life, and I'm going to make it work." "That's a lot of certainty." "I learned from the best." She grinned up at him. "A very controlling, overprotective mafia boss who taught me that sometimes you have to take what you want instead of waiting for permission." Mateo's laugh was genuine, unguarded, beautiful. "You're going to destroy me, Amelia Hart." "Probably," she agreed. "But you're going to love every minute of it." She took the exam 4 weeks later, Mateo waiting outside the building like he'd waited through Sophia's labor, tense, protective, unable to do anything but be present. When she emerged 3 hours later, she was exhausted and exhilarated and more herself than she'd been in years. "Well?" he asked. "I think I passed." She threw her arms around him, not caring that they were in public, not caring that his men were watching. "I think I actually passed." He lifted her off her feet, spinning her around, his smile brilliant and rare. Of course you did. You're extraordinary. She was. They were. This impossible combination of poverty and power, violence and healing, sacrifice and reward. It shouldn't have worked. By every logical measure, it was doomed to fail. But Amelia had learned that logic didn't account for the moment you chose to stop running toward your future and started saving a life instead. It didn't account for the man who'd see that choice and decide you were worth reshaping the world for. It didn't account for love that bloomed in impossible soil and refused to die. 3 months later, she got her exam results, a perfect score that guaranteed her acceptance anywhere she wanted. She framed them and hung them in the mansion's medical suite, where she continued to care for Sophia and her beautiful daughter. Where she studied for her residency while Tommy did his homework at the kitchen table. Where Matteo found her most evenings, pulling her away from her books to dance in the living room to music only they could hear. She'd given up everything to save a stranger. The stranger had given her a family. And the Mafia boss who never forgot a debt had given her something no amount of money could buy, a second chance, a real choice, and a love that was as dangerous as it was devastating. On her wedding day, Sophia was her maid of honor, glowing and healthy with her daughter on her hip. Tommy walked her down the aisle in a suit Matteo had bought him, pride radiating from every step. And Matteo stood at the altar in black, waiting for the woman who'd chosen compassion over ambition and somehow ended up with both. Any regrets? He asked as they swayed together during their first dance, the reception a carefully controlled chaos of two worlds colliding. Amelia thought of that morning, of the exam hall doors closing, of the choice that had seemed like an ending. Not a single one, she said honestly. You? Just that I didn't find you sooner. He kissed her, soft and sure. That I didn't get to see you save her. That I wasn't there the moment you became the most important person in my world. You're there now, she said. That's what matters. He held her closer, and somewhere in the crowd, Sophia laughed at something Tommy said, and the baby cooed, and the life Amelia had built from ruins and second chances felt solid and real in hers. She'd missed the exam to save a life. She'd gained a family. And the debt the Mafia boss swore to repay had transformed into something neither of them had expected, a love story written in sacrifice and blood, in second chances and impossible choices, in the space between who they'd been and who they'd become together. It shouldn't have worked. But it did. And that made all the difference.